everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Reading Party podcast with Megan and Lexi. This episode continues our season looking at modern retellings of the Iliad and the Odyssey, ancient epics known for both brutal violence and instances of sexual assault. This episode is not suitable for under 18s. We hope you have your favourite beverage and snack ready to go, because we've got our teas and are ready to start spilling the tea on our latest ancient story. Hello everyone, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 2 of the Reading Party podcast. This week we're continuing our discussion of Maya Dean's fantastic book, Wrath Goddess Sing. So, Wrath Goddess, the second half.
Yep.
We left off, they just got to Egypt.
Yes.
So what was your favourite part of the whole Egypt experience?
See, it's hard because I love so much of it. But also it was so brief. So
Maya packed a lot into a relatively short expedition.
Yeah, so I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're not going to see a lot. So I would say probably the journey down to like Akhenaten. It's like it's not called Akhenaten, but it's clearly the home city of Akhenaten. So that was like super chill because I've always loved the Amarna period. So anything that's got like that stuff in it, I was like, yes.
No, that was cool. And I liked so on that journey that like you find out that Helen has essentially followed them like in spirit deity form, and then she possesses a couple of Egyptian guards and attacks them, and amazing. And then you have the whole reference to Joseph, who will be the main character of Maya's next book. But Joseph was a trans woman who, from what is revealed in this very, very brief episode, ends up in a relationship with Akhenaten and Nefertiti, which is super cool. And catchphrase of the book, unexpected. So that was awesome. My favorite part of Egypt, I think, was the labyrinth.
Ooh, that was such a close second. It was so good. It's really like a smorgasbord for any Egypt lovers, because it's a bunch of like Easter eggs, really, because there's not enough time to go through anything not super vital to like the plot, but I loved the labyrinth. It was just like I was a little confused because I was like, so is this like the Minotaur's labyrinth, or is it like inspired by, I was like, what on earth is this inspired by, this labyrinth mystery of like 300 rooms? I was like, come on, there's nowhere that big in ancient Egypt. So I was like, what is this? So I was it was a happy surprise because I was just like, oh, this is different.
It was very cool. And then there's the crocodile. I never know if they're crocodiles or alligators. I can't remember. One of the two, great big giant lizard things with teeth, like creeping around the labyrinth, and you're not sure if it's actually there or if it's not there, but it's really spooky. And it's kind of made worse because Mariapi says before they even go in, like, I've got 4 rooms deep into this thing, and if you go any deeper, you get lost forever. So you're like, are they gonna come out again? And the whole reason they've gone to Egypt is to find these these god-killing weapons that Achilles had looked for in the tomb of the Amazon queens, and it wasn't there. It was a trap set by Helen. So you're like, is this another trap? And it's not. They get the weaponry that they're looking for in this awesome armor neck piece that is supposed to protect you from the gods being able to see you and influence you. So that was very cool. And
I also just thought it was poetic that these are like ancient god killing moon rocky sort of like sci-fi weapons found in Egypt, but I love how they were given Greek names of significance. That was like such a welcome surprise. I mean, it shouldn't surprise me at that like anymore, but to name your sword Aletheia, which means truth. It's literally the word for truth in Greek. And then I think she named the what was it? The spear, was it? Or was it a
I don't
I think it was a
remember.
spear. I think it was a spear, but either way, the other weapon it was Vimos, which is like after the god, the embodiment of terror, right? Because like you have the two gods who are brothers, who are the sons of Ares, Phobos and Vimos, fear and terror, which is sort of a rough translation. That's not actually what it means, but yeah. So I
Close
was kind
enough.
of like, oh my god, she named her spear like terror, and the sword is truth. So she's gonna go and fight the freaking Hittites with fear, with terror and truth.
It was awesome.
It was so cool, but also it was a bit creepy because I was literally just not sure. Like, you get this like dream sequence where you meet Kia, who, if you are into Egypt, you'd probably be like, "What the fuck?" But Kia was like Tut's mother? Question mark. Um,
Maybe.
like we think that's who she was. We just know her name, but that's really all we know. But it was like, so I was like super chill. I was like, okay, that's cool. But then when you have like Akhenaten and Nefertiti's names, I was equally shocked but pleased that Maya used their like long ass
Yeah.
Egyptian titles, because I
Yeah.
was like, come on, Nefertiti's Nefertiti, and then she like goes for it, and I was like, oh my god, is she gonna name her the Ankepru Ray Neferu Watan Nefertiti? And then she like goes for it, and I was like, oh yes.
Maya's attention to detail is nothing if not impressive.
I know.
It's,
Oh,
it's so good.
my
It's so
Egyptologist
good.
heart was like bursting. And I was like, I'm gonna cry. Someone got it right in popular fiction. It's not a history book.
Yeah, it was super cool. And then the confrontation between Kia and Achilles. Because yeah, you're right. There's this like weird dream sequence when Achilles goes into the labyrinth to find this weaponry and like passes out or goes into the divine realm or something. We're not entirely sure what happens. This is after the giant lizard with massive teeth part of things. So she's in this like other place with, it's not even Kia. Is it like her sarcophagus?
Yeah, it's her sarcophagus, and so she's like in it, and it's like Achilles like touches the sarcophagus and then establishes this connection where she can like see inside of it.
Yeah,
But
and
like,
Kia's like, "Who the hell are you? What are you doing?
yeah.
Please tell me why I should not like kill you right now." And Achilles is like, "No, no, I'm like you. I'm like you." And you get kind of flashbacks of like Kia's past and the torment she suffered as a trans woman, and then Achilles obviously has got all of her own torment as a trans woman, and Kia's like, "Oh, so you think we're the same because we have similar pasts?" I don't think so. But she gives her the weaponry anyway.
Because of this whole like, I don't know how, I mean, please tell me what your reaction was, but the whole like, Kia really doesn't like the gods, and so she was kind of like, I will kill you now because you are the daughter of like Athena. And you suddenly have Achilles just being like, well, oh wait, I'm their tool. No, I hate them too, I'll kill them too. Were you like a bit like, what?
Um, a little, but not massively, because I felt like there had been enough, like little bits and pieces scattered throughout the first half of the book where Achilles has like zero actual respect for the gods, and especially with what Helen's doing and the like the backstory that gets revealed by Athena and Hera, like it felt a little sudden, but also I could see where it had come from.
Okay, yeah, I guess it wouldn't have been like, it wasn't the most shocking, but I guess for me when I read it, and then especially after her mother essentially transforms her into a
Yeah.
real woman, there's that whole kind of like part where she was kind of like, okay, well, now I will no longer curse my mother because she gave me this gift way too late, of course, but like she
But
gave it to
yeah,
me. And so there was that whole passage where she was like, yeah, okay, I'll do whatever the gods want, including going to this war. And so then to suddenly be like, yeah, I'll take these weapons and I will kill my mother, kill the gods. I was like, oh. I was like, I mean, I can see why you have no love for them, but just being like, all right, rage, kill. Okay, cool.
yeah. I also wasn't entirely sure if that was a decision made in the moment just to get the weapons, and like maybe she wasn't entirely planning on going through with it. It was a little unclear.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, okay, well, maybe she's just gonna lie because she's like, I want these freaking weapons, but
I need them.
yeah.
But
So
anyway,
anyway,
she gets them.
she gets them, and then she like wakes up from this, but also then she finds Brzezos and Mariapi, and they also had found the box of weapons. So you're kind of like in this, but so who actually found them?
Yeah.
A little mysterious. And then they just sail back to Pyramses. You skip all that because she was just like, and they sailed back the way they came. Past X city, X city, X city, and X city. And you're like, okay, there's obviously
Speedboat version.
Exactly. And then I was a little sad. I was hoping to get some Odysseus in Egypt action, but nothing happens. It's just, and he got the grain.
They got the grain and
they're
they
going
go
back.
home. Yeah.
Yeah. So very brief, but it was very much appreciated for people who like ancient Egypt and more other Near Eastern cultures, I suppose.
Yeah, it was a cool little diversion and side adventure. And I think that's something that came up in the last episode as well, that this is like the Iliad almost plays a backdrop to the story of Achilles. So you get all of these extra little bits and pieces that aren't included in the Iliad, but are, like, I think pretty plausible if you're looking at it as a 10-year war. I mean, I think you said last time, they have to get grain or they're all going to starve. And I mean, where do you get grain in the ancient Mediterranean? You go to Egypt. So that it made sense. It was very fitting for the time and the place. And it just adds a little bit of like depth, I think, to the book as a whole.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So then after they get back, or well, it kind of like I guess it's revealed in Egypt, but like they don't do much with it. But then they get back, and then suddenly, Achilles is pregnant, and so is Mariapi, right?
Yes, they're both pregnant, and like I think Brzezos in Egypt, because Achilles is kind of nauseous, and she's like, maybe I ate something weird and funky, or maybe Helen poisoned me or something, and Brzezos is like, you're pregnant. Are you a moron? Like, you're pregnant. You'll be fine, but there is a baby inside you right now. So that was, and it's Achilles' baby, not Achilles' baby. Of course, it's Achilles' baby. It's Agamemnon's baby, which is, I mean, again, we spoke about the difference in their relationship to what you see in the Iliad and literally every other version of this story. And in this, not only are they like good friends and having sex, they are now having a baby. And it's the like that goes back to the beginning of the book, and it's like the thing that Achilles has daydreamed about, like having a baby. And now it's happening, and it's really great, except there's also this war going on, and we know that she will die. So then what happens to the baby?
Yeah, well, and then I guess I was even more shocked just because I was like, look, I'm not trans, so I can't speak to this, but I'm pretty sure that if I were, and then woke up with actually the physical change too, like magically by my goddess mother, I'd be like tracking my periods and shit because like, hey, that's exciting as hell. So the fact that like there's this line where Achilles was like, I don't think I've bled since I started the war, and I was like, it took you how many months to like not notice that you were not having another period? I'm sorry. I was like, the experience of like every woman ever is like, fuck, this month is my period, fuck. So I was just like, wow, okay, I don't know how. All right, I don't know. I was just like, I am super annoyed every month because when I know it's coming, I'm like, and this is when I wish I could say, oh, this is when it would be, but it's not. So I was just like, yeah, wow. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So that was just my stray observation of, the chapter.
And then Mariapi's pregnant too.
Yeah, I was like, that timeline was a little more unclear to me, at least, because I was like, what? But wouldn't she have been pregnant like before? But maybe not.
I mean, so skipping forward a bit, she goes into labor like a couple of months, I feel, before Achilles
She does. That's
delivers.
true. That's true.
Yeah, so they get back and
I don't know.
they're kind of back into the war, and there's this
I don't know
whole
where it drops us off because I was a bit confused by the timeline of the war itself. So it was like they got back, and I think as soon as they get back, that's when we get the duel. But no, because they go out and fight first, and that's when. Well, no one important dies, right? Like they go to battle and then they come back and they're all blood soaked and whatever, but like nothing changed. Oh, and then that's when Mariapi goes into labor.
Yeah. And it's all stressful and sad and
not what I was expecting, considering
no.
Mariapi was like, oh yes, my family, we have a history of being strong in childbirth, so everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And then it's like she's like casting doubt onto Achilles, where she was like, well, I mean, your mother's half goddess, so you should be fine. But also, you come from a family with like big heads, so that sucks to suck. So like, good luck pushing that baby out. And she's like, but my family, we're all like, we're strong, like child birthers. And so you're like, okay, so she kind of sets it up where you're like, okay, so Achilles might die from this because of her family's history, but Mariapi will be okay. So I was completely shocked when Mariapi started having like really bad problems, and the fact that it wasn't coming, she was praying. And then I thought it was a very funny touch for her to also be like starving the whole time. She's like in labor where she's like, give me food, I just need to eat. And I was like, is this like a real reaction from like a pregnant lady? I was like, I thought pregnancy was the I want to eat, but not labor.
It varies. I couldn't eat when I was in labor because I was like kind of nauseous, but first labors can go so long. It's like, I don't know the average, but it's not uncommon for it to be like 12 to 24 hours of labor. So you do get hungry. Yeah, it was amusing.
Yeah, but okay, so as a mom though, how did you read and sort of absorb the whole birth saga?
It was very well written. It was obviously heartbreaking because you get to the point where you know that there is an actual problem. This isn't just it's a labor, it's going to take as long as it takes, and then you're like, oh god, oh no. And it was hard reading. I've had a stillbirth before my son Harry, and that was obviously horrific. And reading it and kind of not really reliving my own experience because it was a very different experience, but reading it and knowing that the baby is probably not okay, and you can tell that Mariapi is also not okay, and like how many lives are we going to come out of this saga with? It was very shaking, but I think it was very sensitively written, and yeah, it was very sad. It was very sad. And then later you have the descriptions of, so for those who haven't read the book, Mariapi and her baby neither of them make it. And Achilles is convinced that Mariapi has found a way to come back from the dead because they've been doing these magical spells, and Mariapi has like said, I found a way, I can do it. So she, like, Achilles refuses to let anyone do anything to them. She won't let Patroclus embalm Meriapi, which Patroclus is deeply upset by because it's what his wife wanted. She's an Egyptian royal. This is what they do. It's incredibly important. And she's like, no. And I think she makes the promise to him, I'll preserve them myself. And she does through like goddess magic. But then you get this description of Meriapi lying in, I don't know if it's in her sarcophagus or just lying down, but they've put the baby on her chest and they're both kind of made up for their funerals. And it's just like, my heart is just breaking right now. But it was very well written, and Achilles' grief was, it made a lot more sense for this to be the reason why Achilles refuses to fight. I don't know if it's because I'm a mother or because I'm a woman or because I'm just not a warrior type person, but having this grief be the reason why she won't fight as opposed to like some manly spat over a slave girl, it felt a lot more real to me.
Yeah, no, I agree completely because I mean, I'm not a mother, but I'm still a woman. And like, I don't know, obviously we're not dudes, we're not guys, so we can't like speak to the experience of that bromance thing. But in terms of like female bonds of friendship, like it's been going on for centuries. Like, I mean, I remember reading in high school, like characterizations of relationships between women in like 1700s, 1600s. And like women were encouraged at that time to form such close bonds with their female friends that like they were basically encouraged to actually just fall in love, because it was like either your husband or your best friends, like those were your options to sort of fall in love with. So just in like knowing that historically and being a woman myself, having several close friends, like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that like if a really close friend of mine died like that, I'd be like, no. I don't care if there's war. I'm staying in my tent. Until we find a way.
Especially because
like,
throughout the labor, you've got Achilles essentially crying out to the god, saying, "You have got to do something to save my sister." And like, remember, the whole war is for the gods. It's their thing. It's their, like, that's why they're all there. And Achilles is like, "This is literally the one thing I'm asking you for, and you can't do it.
Yeah.
Tell me why I should go and kill people for you."
And they were there. They had some gods. She went and she was like, all right, cow goddess of fucking marriage and childbirth and shit. Like, do your duty.
Do something.
And what did she do? She went and she was like, okay, well, I'll get Iphigenia to come and help you. So she comes and then can't do anything, which I found interesting. And then she even like begs her mother, and her mother is like, okay, well, I'm doing everything I can. But it was interesting to me how like in this retelling, the gods were like too weak to do anything. So it's like they were trying, but they were too weak. And I found that really interesting. So they're not these like all powerful, I can literally fix it by snapping my fingers. So placing limits on it was a really interesting choice, but I think it really works for the plot. Yeah, that was hard to read. But no, so it makes sense. And like in her grief, Briseis essentially gets so mad that Achilles won't fight that Briseis like
ups and leaves.
Yeah, he's just like on his own. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go join Agamemnon. Bye. We should mention, because we kind of skipped over it because this happened after Egypt, but they have a threesome, Agamemnon, Briseis, and Achilles. They were just like talking, and then there's this like admission of, hey, when I was a woman, I like really had a thing for you, but then you got on your ship and left. But yeah. And then he was like, oh yeah, I remember you. Interesting. And then they're like having this flirty exchange in the tent.
Don't they wrestle?
They do. They have this like flirty exchange in this tent. And so Achilles is like sitting there with the two men talking about this. And then, Briseis was like, yeah, well, when I was a woman, I wanted to wrestle you, but then you like left. And he was like, well, we can wrestle now. And I was like, oh no, this is not gonna go well. Like anything that starts and ends like that is gonna turn into something more. And then they were like, yeah, great. And then Achilles has this like horrified, perfect reaction of like, it in the tent, you want to wrestle? And they're like, yeah, you can judge. She was like, okay. And then so it's like they wrestle, and then Briseis like beats Agamemnon, and instead of him being like as pissed or as mad as you might expect him to be, he's just like,
Okay.
cool, and now we passionately kiss. And then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so that happens.
So that happens. I don't
and
know.
And then Briseis just leaves Achilles when Achilles won't fight, and it's like, I'm going to go stay with Agamemnon for a bit.
Okay, were you as shocked as I was about the threesome or having like
so not hugely, because like from the Iliad that there is this relationship in like between Agamemnon and Briseis, and then because of the change between Achilles and Agamemnon in Wrath Goddess, I was like, okay, I can see this being a relationship, but being a different kind of relationship. So I was a little surprised, but not massively, because it made sense. Like Achilles like didn't seem to be terribly emotionally invested in either man. So like having Briseis and Agamemnon have a sexual interaction like didn't seem like it would trigger any kind of jealousy on Achilles' part. So I didn't expect a threesome, but I did expect Briseis and Agamemnon to like have a fling or something. So yeah, okay. It was interesting though, and it was cool.
Yeah. No, it was unexpected. Again, the theme of this entire book, unexpected. But
we should talk about Zeus.
Yes.
So throughout like the middle and second half of the book, there's this like planet. Is it a planet? Is it a star? I don't know. It's kind of metaphysical, like coming closer and closer and closer to Earth. And Athena and the cow goddess are always like, look, that's Zeus. We have to essentially wrap this whole thing up before he gets here, because once he gets here, we're all fucked. And like it lands on Troy, I think. I'm not sure. I think let's go with that. It lands on Troy, and then they're like, okay, well, Zeus has arrived. We'll do our best, but we're screwed. And there's this eagle suddenly flying around, and it's Zeus. And then he comes to visit Achilles.
Yep, and this is like in the depth of Achilles' grief. So like she's just been pouting and not fighting, and then apparently like Zeus is the only one who's like promising, okay, well, if you don't fight, I will, have the strength, and I can bring Mariapi back, and do all these things.
Helen. He's trying to say that he's on her side, really, and
that goes about as well as you think it would.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's like, I'll protect Patroclus. Patroclus can go and fight in your armor, and I'll protect him. And there's this like scene of essentially Patroclus rampaging down to the battlefield and killing everyone in his path. And then he gets to Hector, and Zeus like pushes him onto Hector's sword or spear. Do I remember that right?
Yeah, it's like Zeus guides the spear into his back, and Apollo, who is backing Hector, make sure he falls on the sword. So he's like impaled from the front and the back, which is like,
so he's murdered by gods, awful. Essentially. It's not even a duel, it's just like instant death.
Yeah. So I was like, oh shit. Okay. Well,
yeah, that was rough.
Yeah. So Patroclus is dead. And then I'm trying to remember what exactly happens next, because Achilles like finds out that he's dead, and then obviously is like so pissed that Zeus didn't keep his promise, but like surprise, big shocker there. So then gets out, and the duel happens like quite quickly. they don't spend the time. There's no time spent really like in the movies or anything where it's like, you have these
run
big
up
scenes.
and
Yeah, so it's like we crammed in Penthesilea and Hector in the same scene, and it was kind of like a really abrupt. I felt almost like super abrupt because it's like, and then Hector is dead, and then Penthesilea is dead, and then Achilles is ragey and goes back to her tent. And I was like, what? That's it? Like, I don't know. I feel like I was expecting more, just a bit. I don't know. Were you?
I was, yes. So I got the feeling that Achilles has just lost her patience and she's lost her family. She has very little left to keep going for. And we've just kind of got to the raging, wrathful part of the story. And she's like, you have to die now. And she goes and she kills them. And that's kind of it. But no, I was expecting a bit more of an elaborate kind of drawn out battle sequence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's Hector, but okay, like whatever, cool. So, I guess my timeline is still because as we've said now, like, yeah, the war is just kind of a backdrop, an excuse, but it's not the focus. So I'm a little lost as to where in the war this was.
Yeah.
But after Hector is dead, at some point, Priam comes and begs, and I also thought that was going to be a bit of a bigger scene, but it was like,
yeah, it was just, yeah, sure, he can take the body. I don't care.
Well, she asked for 3 things, and
yeah,
they're like, and in a very calm way,
Yeah.
She was just like, I want you to give me Helen. Well, I can't do that. She's not mine to give. Okay, can you give me the city? Well, I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was some caveat where he was like, I would do something, but I can't. And then it was like, okay, bless my child and I will give you yours. And so he was like, okay, sure.
That I can do.
So,
yeah.
He like puts his hand on her belly and blesses the child, Neoptolemus, and then like Hector goes away. And it was literally as fast as just that.
I get the feeling that the 10-year span, or like 9.5 whatever year span of the war in the poem is very much condensed. This is not a 10-year book. This is a few months. And I think that's probably deliberate on Maya's part. A lot of having, like, you and I have both spoken to her before, we've done an interview that will be following this episode. But what she's trying to do is write a story that is feasibly the source material for the Iliad. So you have this war, this battle, and then it kind of gets blown up into legend and then myth. So I suspect it's not supposed to be the 10-year epic we know and love. It's a shorter war that then gets in later times misremembered as this like epic 10-year siege. But yeah, because this is most definitely not. I'd be surprised if this was even a year in real time.
Yeah. I don't know. It was I literally just cannot figure out the timeline. But again, that's kind of like the nice part, because it doesn't matter so much.
Yeah, because the story is about the people.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, but then Hector goes home, and then am I right? Achilles like goes into labor immediately after that?
It's pretty close to. I can't remember. I think it's very, very close to that. And it's like, it's another thing where you know that this can't end well. You know that it's not going to be a good ending to this particular labor either. And her princess girlfriend from right at the beginning of the book has arrived. Apparently Athena went and told her, like, Achilles is having a baby, she needs you. So she like gets on a ship and sails over, and Achilles sees her and is like, and they actually have a dream meeting a few chapters before this. They're both their subconsciouses are like in an astral plane somewhere on the beach, lying together, talking the way they used to. And that was very sweet. And then she comes back again at the end of the book. And I did like very much that relationship was repaired. she said, I wasn't going to come, but then your mother told me what you were naming the child. And it was the name that they had picked out together for their imaginary baby, if they could ever have one. So she comes back.
And then I think, as I said, like one of the other most shocking parts was when Achilles goes into labor and then starts to also the baby is not the trouble, but she has trouble because the gods are like on another plane and they are shooting her with arrows and attacking her, and I'm kind of just sitting there like, the fuck?
It's very trippy. I like the end of the book is super trippy. So she's giving birth to this baby and like crying out in pain as one does in labor, and it's not because of the labor, it's because she's being shot with these like, metaphysical arrows.
And no one can see it. So I remember my reaction was just like, if I were one of her mermaids just seeing this happening, I would have been like, what the fuck is going on? This does not look like a normal childbirth to me.
Is like, no one else concerned by this?
Because she's like screaming and retching, and like you have this description of her like desperately like hanging and sagging, and then Briseis is like trying to catch her, and I'm like, okay, but I'm sorry, but pregnancy does not make you like literally like melt into the arms of someone like sagging, like if anything you're pushing against them, but she like sagged, and I'm like, is anyone else concerned that Achilles is just not acting like a normal woman in labor? Like, I have questions. I have concerns.
Yeah. It was... Yeah. I did like that it wasn't a... It wasn't ever going to be a normal birth experience for Achilles. Like, she's a demi-goddess, maybe a full goddess by this point. Like her status as mortal shifts quite dramatically during the book. So I'm like, don't quite know where she stands on the mortal divine spectrum right now. But you know that the mortal part is definitely ending, and it has to end because it's the Iliad. It's what happens. Achilles dies. And her dying during childbirth in the way that Meriapi did, I think would have been less believable because of who she is. So I think having the gods is very much, it's like a fitting, or it's maybe a more believable death for Achilles, but it's also a fitting like climax maybe for the whole like divine battle that's been going on. And you kind of think Achilles ultimately dies from all of these arrows, and you're like, well, I guess Helen's won. And then there's like a whole other chapter or two. How many chapters are there after Achilles dies?
No, there's two. There's two. There's like one super long, trippy one, and then yeah. No, I was like, no, it's gonna be some sort of epilogue thing. It's just gonna be like what happens with the child. And then you go into Super Smash Bros. Brawl land. And then you become what I've decided to call Transformer Kirby, where Meriapi, like her spirit, found a way with the mystical moon rock thing to preserve her essence.
Right, so they take the, what is it, it's like meteoric iron or something that the gods are allergic to or vulnerable to, and she makes it into like bodysuit of armor. Yeah. Which is awesome, and you're right, very much Transformers. And then it sucks, Meriapi and Achilles and Patroclus inside it. So they're like a goddess made of these three spirits.
Because it's not even like one person. Like,
no, because you've got like dialogue
everything
between the three of them. And
but
she's
I'm like,
sitting on this throne on the moon.
Body. And I'm like, okay, there's all this dialogue where it's like the three of them together in one body where you have the dialogue. So I'm imagining it's like you don't see the body moving. The mouth is not moving, but you just have the flashing of the thoughts, which I was like, okay, that's so meta and so confusing. So I'm like, all right, cool. And then and then the goddesses are dying. So both Hera and Athena are dying, and then like Aphrodite or something is dying, and then they like absorb her, and then they absorb like
Zeus and all the other
and
gods, and are like, you must play nice now, because the thing about the meteoric iron is they can't get out again. Once they're in, they're stuck. Like, these are your roommates for the rest of eternity. You better deal with it.
So this process of like osmosis is kind of like Kirby swallowing his enemies in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. So I'm just like,
He's got his hats changing as it goes.
Yeah, so I'm just imagining this transformer metal person on a throne, Kirby swallowing people, but they don't ever come out. And then it's like all of them together. Then they become like millions in this one against evil Helen, who they chase around in some epic like Transformers chase in the
It's
moon.
like an anime mecha fight scene. That's what's going on here. It's like something from Neon Genesis Evangelion. Like, rampaging across the moon, fighting each other. And it's epic and it's awesome and it's very confusing.
Yeah, so I was like, this is quite trippy, and I didn't really know what to think other than, okay, this is happening. But then they, so, I don't know, like, they don't defeat Helen. Well, I don't know, because Helen is like saying that she's going to curse Achilles with you are going to be forgotten. The only person who will know is the person who's protected, which is Didamia, her original Skiran lover, who takes her son Neoptolemus, because she has like the brooch, the necklace thing, whatever, to protect her. But then she was like, yeah, you will be erased and everyone on Earth will remember you as a man, which is and like changes her story. So that's kind of the explanation for how we get
the Iliad,
modern Iliad, which I thought was clever. Yeah, I was just like, wow. But I don't know, I couldn't tell, did they actually like just trap Helen with them? Yes. Not in the body, but like in space, or
I think what happened was they ultimately do end up trapping her, but they trap her and she doesn't actually come to peace with it like the rest of the gods do. So like giant Achilles Kirby swallows all the other gods, and they finally find peace with each other and can reach some kind of agreement as to like, we should not be doing this anymore. I think eventually they also swallow Helen, but she doesn't kind of acquiesce in the way that they did, but she's trapped, so she can't do anything. But this whole experience takes like millennia, because you have descriptions of time passing on Earth and like civilizations rising and falling and persecutions happening and all of this stuff. Like they've broken the cycle of the gods like warring and one side winning and then everything kind of resetting. They've broken that cycle so humanity can kind of just keep going by itself. But they're just kind of like in space with this giant battle with Helen. Yeah, it was,
and like the gods realize their own legacy as they're forgotten, because there was that one like paragraph or line or section where it was like, yeah, Zeus was the most revered for millennia, but then one day people like stopped believing in the gods, and then Zeus's reputation became one of like whoring, murderer, like just like horrible dude. And then there was that line about like, yeah, he realized his like reputation now as like the biggest man-ho, and he was like, well, now I gotta like fix that. So I was like, what? I mean, yes, accurate, yes, but like, what? So yeah, so time in this metaverse with Transformer Achilles Kirby, which is, I love that that's just what we're calling her.
It works. It describes perfectly what is happening.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, so that's all happening. And then it's so interesting because that's like a long ass chapter, but then the very last chapter of the book goes all the way back to as soon as Neoptolemus is being raised.
Mm-hmm.
Because you do get that Neoptolemus and Didamia went back to Skyros, I
Yeah.
think, to be raised, and then she's just like remembering
Fond memories of
Achilles.
Achilles, yeah.
So then I think the very last scene is just like she's there with Neoptolemus on the beach, and then she's like, you know, having this reflecty moment about Achilles, and it's like, we did it, and then it's like the end, and you're like, oh, okay.
How much acid did I just take? And exactly what happened here?
In just like the last 2 chapters.
I think is deliberately confusing, because I think Maya's trying to give a sense of like how the divine realm operates on a completely different set of rules to what we're used to and what we live with. But I do feel like I need to go back and reread that chapter just a couple of times to get the hang of like exactly what happened. And I want to reread the whole book because there are, like you said, with the Egypt thing, there's all these little Easter eggs, and I feel like there are probably little details and bits and pieces here and there that I maybe missed or didn't fully appreciate the first read through because I was like so engrossed in the actual meat of the story. But I loved it.
Yeah, no, I think overall Maya did a great job. It's clearly well researched. It's very entertaining. It's definitely not a historical book. It is definitely just completely work of fiction, but a fantastic work of fiction. I would say this is the kind of book that you read if you're just looking for something wacky and fun, but also kind of historical, but also just like super unexpected, but also not maybe a book for children.
Absolutely not. This is, if you're looking for something like Percy Jackson with a little bit more historical context, do not choose this book unless you're 18 or above. If you're 18 and over, you go for it. Enjoy yourself. Tell Briseis we said hi. But absolutely not for our younger readers.
No. You might be traumatized for all time.
Oh, before we end, can we talk briefly about the role that blood sacrifice plays?
Yes,
I know this.
Yes,
so this comes up again in the interview we did with Maya, but that was so clever. That was so clever. Like the whole point of the war is to give blood sacrifices to the gods because blood sacrifice is what kind of powers them and gives them their magic. And then you find out, like towards the end of the book, that Achilles herself is a goddess. It's not just like a demigoddess, but actually divine, and can take these sacrifices for herself, which is one of the reasons why Zeus was keeping her off the battlefield, so she would not get more powerful. You also find out that she transformed her own body and was the source of the storm right at the very beginning when she was swimming across the ocean to Agamemnon. That wasn't Athena. Like, she did that to herself because she's got this divinity and it's stuff that she wanted to do, and it was like an extension of her power. And I was like, yes, this is amazing. And I love it. But also, oh my God, so much blood.
Yeah, I mean, that was really unexpected. I think once I understood what was happening, it made sense. But yeah, no, the initial, I was kind of just like, but what? Because, you know, I think we're so used to when, like, the Greeks wanted to pray to the gods, anyone really wanted to pray to the gods, you make your food, and then, you know, you scrape a portion of your food into the fire, and you say it to the gods, and then you just dedicate that. Or if you really need something, you would sacrifice an animal, or at worst, I suppose, a person, for Iphigenia in the original source material. But, like... yeah, no one's ever gone with the, like, if I kill you in battle, then automatically your power, your essence,
is mine, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, that's quite a new one. I kind of liked it, but you know what? It honestly made me think of it as, I started thinking when I was reading that, this would transform excellently into a video game. Because if you're going around and like every person you basically kill goes to like feed someone's XP, I'm like, all right, choose your god, choose your skill tree. Every time you kill an enemy, that's more points for your skill tree. So I kind of had this like massive video game type of thing in my
This
head
would
every
make an
time I read a
excellent
battle.
video game, just the whole story.
I was thinking about that, and I was like, I think this would lend well, especially with the trippy sort of end. It would be really hard to show that, I think, in definitely movie form, but even TV form, that would be hard. I was like, this would lend great to a graphic novel or a video game.
Be a
because if it's
fantastic like
graphic
Final
novel-
Fantasy style cutscene right at the very end, like the big epic battle between the giant Kirby transformer and whatever other gods.
I was kind of like, but how fun would it be to play this final fight scene fighting
so
Helen
fun.
as the Transformer Kirby?
So fun.
Like, just like, can Nintendo make it so that way, since they make the original Kirby be able to just like swallow people, can they do it so that way they can animate this Transformer like metal thing
Giant bulging
to
sheets.
swallow people?
I wanted to ask also, what's your like, having read through the whole thing, what are your thoughts on having Helen be the main antagonist? How did that play for you?
You know, it was really interesting because it was so unexpected, and I kind of really liked it. But also I was kind of like, well, if she's the antagonist and if she's so evil, the only thing that I guess I never really got past, and maybe it was just because we had to take it as like she's just wily in all ways. But the fact that Menelaus was written in a way where he was very protective and careful about women in general. And so I would imagine that it would extend to his own wife, and the fact that it was like fought for her, but she didn't care. But even then, the Trojan War historically is like turned into this pseudo love story between Paris and Helen. If she wasn't stolen, then she ran away with him. And to have literally nothing in this entire book about Helen and Paris.
Does Paris even appear?
Yeah, because there's a duel between Menelaus and Alexandru.
Yeah.
So, but again,
he's like such a minor character.
It is, and like Achilles sees this duel from very far away, and it's described almost as quickly as the very quick duel between Hector and Achilles. So, like there's no emphasis placed on it. So, like, yeah, he's such a minor character. He's only mentioned, but the fact that Helen herself is just like, yeah, I was one man's wife, and then I was taken by another one, and now I'm gonna have them fight a war for me because ha ha ha. It was interesting, but also I guess there were parts of that, for me at least, where I was kind of like, that doesn't track with how I would make sense of it. There's a fair bit of stretching of the imagination I feel that needs to be done, especially when Menelaus is written the way he was. I mean, I think to me it might have been a little more believable if Menelaus was kind of like the Menelaus from like the Brad Pitt movie, where he's just like, it's not even about her, it's just my property was stolen. Like, then it would make sense to me then that Helen would be like, yeah, I was one man's property, and then another one stole me, so I'm being bartered as property. But to have one written like he really cares and has a lot of emotion and feelings, and then the other one like is not written about at all, so you don't even know how Paris actually feels about her here. I was just like, that's weird.
I did kind of very much get the, even though Helen's is like, even though she gives the impression that, or she like outright says that she was stolen and it was just, she's being used as a pawn, like her character I feel is much more of like a mastermind type. I think it would have been, and maybe this was something that was in the book and I missed it, but I feel like it would have worked a little better to have her be the ultimate mastermind behind the, like, so the war itself is described as a means by which the gods get all of their power back. Instead of having Helen say she was stolen, like having it be that she needed a war to happen, and this was the easiest way she could see to make that happen. So she like seduced Alexander and persuaded him to take her, rather than kind of saying, oh well, someone just took me. Because the rest of the story, she's such an autonomous figure. And you're right, like Alexander, he turns up like once, and Helen is very obviously under the control of no man. And even Zeus is, he's battling for possession of her, but it's very clear that she is encouraging and glorying in the sacrifice destruction as much as any of the other gods are.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess in that context, I would see and understand more, but the fact that like she wasn't, she never said, and it was not made clear that she seduced Paris or Alexander. So yeah, that's the only thing that I was like, okay, that to me it doesn't make as much sense. Like it's not like it doesn't make sense at all, but it just doesn't make as much sense.
She was a great villain, though.
She was a great villain.
I really disliked her.
I did too, but then again, you know, having seen some of the other movies, I also just really, I don't like her in any context. Like, I'm trying to think of all the things I've seen her in. I don't like her in any context. I think anything with Helen, you're gonna hear me be like, oh, this bitch again. Okay, now she's doing this. Now she's doing that. Now she's being helpless. Now she's being conniving. Now she's just being useless.
I think like, at the end of this season, we need to sit down and decide if there's actually an instance in which either of us likes Helen as a character. Like, I think we do. Which media did it best?
I think we do. We need like a full wrap up on Helen, because she's blamed for everything, all these things, this war, the epics, it's all based on her and her face. And, you know, what do they say? Hers is the face that launched 1,000 ships. I'm like, okay, this bitch over here, like, in this one, she's evil. And this one, she's just useless. And this one, she's just annoying. And, like, you know, being like a little twat in the corner. I don't know. Like, I just,
Helen, you know? The woman with no redeeming qualities.
Except a pretty face that bewitches people.
Yes. I'm not sure. Does that count as a redeeming quality, though? It's a quality, certainly.
I don't know. Are you redeemed in any context? Any context, if you're pretty.
It depends who you ask.
I think so, because I'm like, I mean, beauty can be used for a lot of things. Nefarious actions, for sure. I don't know. I feel like, but that in itself is like a really subjective question, right? Because it's like you ask anyone who isn't quote unquote pretty, and they'd probably be like, "Oh, a lot of things in my life would be better if I were pretty. That would redeem me, my beauty." And I suppose, you know, I won't name them, but I've met several unfortunate women throughout my life who are kind of dumb as fence posts. But so the only thing that redeems them, I suppose, is their looks. So I don't know. It depends. But yeah, that's a really shallow way of looking at it, I suppose. I don't know. I feel like I think it's a combination of just seeing and reading and knowing and analyzing Helen and realizing that the only thing she's got going for her is her looks, because her personality sucks. And then maybe it's like me because I've worked in and I'm studying politics, but I'm like, oh my God, Helen reminds me of like all these politicians where it's like if you happen to have a somewhat young and halfway decently in political circles attractive person, people are willing to like forgive them. And it doesn't matter what they do or what their personality is. So I guess I was like sitting and I was like analyzing this last night, but I was thinking Helen is like the female version of like Paul Ryan, or like well, I don't find her super attractive, but I know conservatives who do, but like Sarah Palin, where people were like, oh, she's pretty, it doesn't matter about her personality. That could suck, but like, I mean, she's like got that MILF thing going, so yeah, they're like, you know, they're like, okay, well, she has that MILF thing going, so, you know, whatever, I'll just vote for her. So I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm kind of like, oh my God, is Helen like the MILFy politician?
Is she the Sarah Palin of the Iliad?
Is that horrible? Is that horrible?
Well, so I think the problem is that in the source material we get nothing of her except that she's beautiful. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing an adaptation, what do you do with that? I think that Maya did something very different in that she made her like unequivocally evil,
Mm-hmm.
and gave her a hell of a lot more agency and like dislikable but more personality, I think, than a lot of other adaptations do. But I think because the two things you have are that she's attractive and she's the cause of the war, I think it's quite difficult to build like a likable person around those two things. I think
Oh my God. Yes. No, I've got it. I've got it. Okay, so in Maya's version in Wrath Goddess, Helen is totally like the evil, like Sarah Palin. So she's kind of like conniving and awful and has a horrible personality, but like I guess is quote unquote pretty. But in the more conventional representations, she's like Melania Trump. Like she has no personality. She doesn't do anything. Her big redeeming quality is that she was a model once or whatever, so she's pretty, and then she's willing to go along with the dude who might do the morally questionable, horrible things because she doesn't have a personality of her own.
yep, that works. We've solved it, people. We have
That's
solved the
horrible.
question of who Helen is in modern politics.
Just in modern life,
Yeah.
honestly, it doesn't even have to be political. But yeah, that's who she is.
So do you have final thoughts about Wrath Goddess before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I would say final thought is if you're going into this like we did with degrees of knowledge in the ancient world and especially classics, don't sleep on it. Don't skip it because, it's really tempting, I feel, to be like, okay, yet another sort of retelling of a time-old story. I don't need to hear this. I would say no, give it a chance because I didn't know what to expect and I was very pleasantly surprised by a lot of twists and turns. And I think that it sets the basis for a lot of really cool future storytelling by Maya. I love what she's done, and it really has me excited to read future materials that she does because she's willing to meld a lot of ancient cultures and source material to make one really good narrative. So, my advice is just read it and have fun with it, and please, by no means, don't go into it thinking, yes, this is historically accurate or historically based, because it's not. So just don't read it and like give it a bad review because you're expecting something more historical. It is clearly not. It is very fictionalized. So if you can keep an open mind and just say it's completely fictional, then you're gonna have a great time and it's real trippy.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. There is an excellent level of historical detail in there. Like Maya has done a massive amount of research, which I think helps place it very securely in a time and a place and gives it a very solid background for the whole narrative. But it's a book about a demigoddess and about a god's ancient struggle across millennia over like power and possession and like essentially who rules. So it's not going to be historically accurate for all the research and for all that it is set in a specific time. It, like you said, it's a work of fiction. It's beautifully written. The characters are compelling and believable and sympathetic and absolutely awful in some cases. Don't ever talk to dolphins is one of my main takeaways from this. But absolutely, if you have any interest in ancient mythology or historical fiction, give this a read because it's excellent. But rather than expecting something like maybe The Berlin Girl, maybe think of The Berlin Girl crossed with Star Trek, and you'll have a great time.
And then I would say I just want to add on, like, yeah, my other main takeaway is if you've ever really wanted to know what a Super Smash Bros. Brawl Final Fantasy Transformer Kirby is like, then read this.
You will not be disappointed.
You would not be disappointed. But hey, thanks for joining us, and join us next week because we are talking with the wonderful author Maya Dean.
Right, and the week after that, we're going to be watching Troy, the 2004 movie with Brad Pitt. So if you feel like watching along, or if you haven't watched in a while and you need a refresher, you have 2 weeks to get that done.
Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review, and you can also follow us on social media at The Reading Party Podcast. If you'd like to leave us a book or movie suggestion, then email us at thereadingpartypod@gmail.com. See you next week.